I do have some notes just to keep me on track, because what Byron didn't tell you is, and what my colleagues from the food bank could tell you, I can get off track. So I'm going to try to stay on track and stay close to time. So, so Byron, you know, not everyone has trouble reaching me. Just going to say no. But Byron did finally connect with me. I was in the Portland airport flying home, and he said, I knew he was going to ask me to do something, and I thought, okay, I can do this because I love Byron deeply and profoundly. And he asked me, it's really easy. He said, I just need you to talk about why you do what you do. And I thought, yes, I got this. I have an answer to that. That's pretty easy, to talk about why I do what I do. And so my rote, typical answer over the 20 years that I've been a social worker and working in the nonprofit sector has basically been this. I'm motivated to do what I do because I want to create opportunity for people for whom there have been barriers in their life. And that really comes from a belief that I have that there are systemic barriers in people's lives. So I thought, okay, so there, I'm done. 1 minute in, you got 14 minutes left. But I don't think that's what Byron was asking me to do. So I think what he was asking me to do, obviously, is talk about why I feel that way and what has happened in my life that has motivated me to hold that belief and to want to act on that belief in my life. So I'm going to talk to you about why I feel not just a passion, but a calling and sort of a undeniable intention to try to create a more equitable community in whatever community I find myself in. And I want to talk about that through the lenses of diversity, inclusivity, and equity, and what that has meant in my life as a white middle-class woman, I will add. So my journey in this area, and where my journey really began, a little backdrop for my own kind of family, is that I'm actually the granddaughter of immigrants. So my grandfather's Serbian, came in the early 1900s through Ellis Island, back when you could just kind of come in, and built a life in eastern Pennsylvania, had to drop out of school when he was 14, was a steel worker. And my mom was raised in a very vibrant ethnic community. They actually had a family bar and restaurant, so he would work in the mill during the day and he'd come home and bartend at night, and the family lived above the bar. So she has really great stories about what that was like, right? But it was an ethnic kind of enclave, and communities were still pretty kind of segregated by race and ethnicity and that sort of thing. So that's a little bit of sort of the background. But for myself growing up, I was very fortunate to grow up, as Byron said, in Michigan, in a college town. My dad was a college professor, and I happened to be fortunate to grow up in a really relatively diverse neighborhood and community. And I'll just paint that picture for you. So I lived on a cul-de-sac, and on my cul-de-sac there were, of the 8 families, 2 African-American families, 2 biracial families, a Jewish family, and 2 white Christian families. So right there was a really interesting, right, experience. And that was in a broader little neighborhood that reflected that same diversity. I can't tell you how that happened or why that happened. That just was sort of the circumstance that I grew up in. And so growing up, my 2 very best friends from pre-K all the way through high school, Station Aaron, African-American, we were the Oreos, because when we would do New Edition and No Parking on the Dance Floor, I was in the middle and they were on the sides. I went to Trinity AME Church with Stacia, sang in the choir. I went to synagogue with Laura. I also was Eastern Orthodox growing up, and so because of my family's ethnic background, we had to go to a Greek church because there was no Serbian church, so I joined the Greek dancing group. So here I was, this just hodgepodge of stuff, right? And had this whole eclectic experience growing up. Where's my notes? Okay, there. There it is. Okay, so then one other interesting aspect that I experienced is through my friends, I got connected to Camp Westminster, which was a church camp out of Detroit, Westminster Church of Detroit. So for 7 summers growing up, I'd go to summer camp where I was the minority kid, because most of the kids there were African American. And so, those experiences, that's just the diversity that I just sort of experienced. And I want to just hold that right here. And then I want to talk about inclusion. Because of the fact that I'm mostly mainstream, white, middle class, but because of these experiences, I know what inclusion feels like. Because when I went to camp, I was the minority kid. And inclusion is about being welcomed in, having a sense of belonging, warmth. You know, people say diversity is being invited to the dance, inclusion is being asked to dance. So I know what that feels like, and I know how important it was to me. Even when I was a little Irish Serbian girl going to the Greek church, the fact that those Greek kids let me join the Greek dancing group and go do those things, it means something to be invited in and allowed to be a part of a community. Equity. So it wasn't until young adulthood that I really started to see equity and inequity in my little world that I lived in. And I want to paint that picture for you. So I was college bound because I had a college professor dad and a teacher as a mom. And you know, so these questions that were so clear to me were not clear to a lot of my peers that I grew up with. So yes, I was going to college. There was no discussion about that. And my parents were going to pay for college because they could. That wasn't the case for a lot of my friends. And I was comfortable in that world because I'd spent my childhood going and visiting, being with my dad on a college campus. So I had the social capital, the sense of comfort, right, and connection. And a lot of my friends didn't. And it was at that kind of juncture where I started to see almost an imperceptible schism occur between kids who had these other experiences and other family systems and other class and race and issues going on in myself. And there were 2 very poignant moments that I want to share with you that crystallized this for me. The first one is I was a senior in college. I'd come home for Christmas break, and we were literally opening presents, and I got a call from my high school, one of my high school friends, and she was hysterical on the phone. And she said, I have to come to your house, I have to come to your house, I have to talk to you. And it's very awkward. I'm like, yeah, my family's here, we're having Christmas, you can't just come over. She's like, I have to come, I have to come. So she came over to tell me that the night before, my high school boyfriend had gone to a park and had killed himself. And he had always said, if I don't make it by the time I'm 25, I'm going to end it. And he did. And the next moment, and I'll say a little bit more about that, the next moment that was a crystallizing moment for me was about 4 or 5 years later. I was literally home from work one day. I'm watching the local news, and there's a guy who's holed up in a Motel 6 hotel. I remember that. And he's got 2 little kids with him. He's just strangled his pregnant girlfriend. And it's the police are trying to get him out. And he was another one of my high school friends. And so I've spent countless nights at that guy's house in high school. He also, by the way, wrote the music for the High School Musical. An incredibly talented guy. Both African American men, my boyfriend and Sean, my friend, both had really troubled family circumstances, and both really lost their way and got into very destructive places, right? One violent to himself, one violent to others. And I was just struck with, how does that happen? How do people live together, grow together, learn and love together, and then these schisms happen where life trajectories take these incredibly different paths? And I think, though I would never suggest that Sean and Matt don't have accountability for what happened in their lives, because they do, for sure. But there is an undercurrent, right? There's an undercurrent of inequity that occurs. And I've always just been really conscious of how lucky I am. By no fault of my own, that I had those gifts, that I had, not gifts, that I had those opportunities. So when I think about the food bank and I think about the work we do, we serve almost 600,000 people through the 53 counties that we serve on an annual basis. People who, well, thank you. Thank you to our partners. But these are people who have come into a place of desperation and need for a whole lot of reasons, some of which are situational. It would be the only time they have to go get help. Some of which are deeply rooted in economic, racial, social, class inequities that have led their life trajectory to a point where they need real help. And so I always enter into our work, and my colleagues do, with an understanding of the complexity of what gets people to that place, therefore the complexity of what's required of us to figure out how do we lift people out. And for us, it is both helping them in the moment, but it is also trying to work on some of the deeply rooted injustices that have created inequity in our communities and our society, and not being afraid to step into that space to talk about it and to do something about it. So I'm really happy to be here. I was a little afraid to reveal so much with you all, but it's just a great feeling in this room, and I'm delighted that you are willing to have food for thought like this. I can't wait to hear Brad speak. And I want to thank Byron and the staff for giving me the inertia to take what's in here and what's in here and put it here to you. So thank you guys. Appreciate you.